Our second of three speakers this morning is Father Victor Austin. Father Austin is the canon theologian for the Diocese of Dallas and the theologian in residence at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Dallas. He has served parishes in the Diocese of New York as both a curate and a rector. Father Austin is the author of 7 books, all of which should be consumed, for the direction that they give in our spiritual lives and their in-depth scholarly examinations of their subjects. One of Father Austin's many gifts is taking complex theological principles and constructs, and for most of us, just puzzling aspects of God, and he gives them out in a most accessible everyday application in our lives. Father Austin told me that he may take the material he has prepared for this colloquium and use it in a book on walking. I thought it was going to be his next book, but he's told me that he needs to write about marriage first. But we might be taking part in the birth of Book 8. Also, Father Austin will be our preacher here tomorrow. Masses are at 9 and 11. We have the privilege of hearing from him today and tomorrow. So, my godly advice and counsel to all of you, do not go to church tomorrow. You should come here so that you can hear Father Victor Austin, from whom we're going to hear right now. Father?
Thank you, Father. It's thanks to everyone here at the Advent who's worked to make this event, and I'm so glad to see old friends and meet many people who are new here. And it's a pleasure to have contact with Father James, who he and I were at seminary together way back in the day, and what a blessing to hear from you, Nancy. I first learned about the Camino. I'll say more about this afternoon, but I first learned about the Camino from Nancy. My experience of the Camino is limited to 2 walks. Both were on the Camino Frances. Both were from Roncesvalles to Santiago. I avoided that first day going over the Pyrenees, about 450 miles. I'm a theologian, I'm a widower, I'm a priest, and I've pondered the meaning of walking in general, but also the special kind of walk that is a pilgrimage to a tomb of a saint. And my title is, What Does It Mean to Be a Walking Animal Who is Walking to a Grave? So 2 adjectives poured from my mouth when my bishop in Texas, Bishop Sumner, asked me, why go? I said I wanted to be open and vulnerable. But in truth, the Camino Frances is open and vulnerable with a pretty big safety net. Some discomforts I chose deliberately. I stayed in albergues, mostly hostels for pilgrims along the Camino. In these are bunk beds and shared facilities. They range in size and comfort and cleanliness, with almost universally a welcoming and humane staff. The open and vulnerable part was entrusting myself to strangers. I set out alone on this, but one's never alone. Having on most days not a reserved place to spend the coming night, and then sleeping in a room with people I did not know, some of whom smelled, some snored. I put myself where I wasn't altogether in control, where I had to turn and trust in God to arrange things, to be myself, as it were, on the lookout for God's work. It was a way to learn to be less anxious by not working out details in advance, trusting that when problems arose, I would figure out solutions or other pilgrims at hand would help, and most of all, trusting that God would guide me in the actual moments of vulnerability. And behind all that, and wrapping around it, underneath it, covering it over, open and vulnerable to God. What did God want to tell me? Here I was, a widower of a few years at the point of life when a man starts thinking more about his corporeality, this mortal flesh. What did God want me to know about him, about myself and the world, about us? A fundamental claim of Christian thinking about being human, we call it Christian anthropology, but anybody with any brains knows that's not what most people think of as anthropology. We're thinking about what does it mean to be human. Fundamental claim is that we are unities of body and spirit. Around this is a fundamental claim of creation. The world is God's creation, and it has a claim upon us, just as it is. Now, because of that, theology can rely on science, what science may tell us about this world around us, that we're relying on, that we see as creation. We are interested, then, in human evolution. Now, it turns out that a big question of human evolution is how and why did we become bipedal? The great big human evolutionary story is a story about rising up on our hind legs and walking. And that means, if the body is taken seriously, theology must think about what it means that we are walkers. Walking is different than moving around on four legs. Bipedal walking is different. It's slower, you are more vulnerable, and yet you are able to carry weapons and children, and able to go further and longer. Human ancestors on two legs covered our planet in a way that I'm told is more extensive and different than other migrations of other animals. And being on your hind legs means your intellectual capacity changes as well. That is to say, the human distinctiveness curated over tens of thousands of years, and some say much longer, is that we walk. Bicycles, motor cars, trains, airplanes, spaceships, they are not even a blink in evolutionary history. They are not what has made the human difference. Brain researcher, I found this from the Dallas Public Library, Shane O'Mara, who's written about brain development, writes that to be human is not to have a brain in a body, but to be a mind in motion. And I pointed to my brain, but your brain is not your mind. Your mind is not a physical thing. So to be human is not so much to have a brain in a body, but to have a mind that's in motion. Thinking as we move about is quintessentially human. O'Mara also notes, and I find this delightful, that the opening line of T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is an invitation to take a walk. Let us go then, you and I. Now, Rebecca Solnit is a huge-selling nonfiction writer in a book called Wanderlust. She quotes Mary Leakey, a paleoanthropologist. One cannot overemphasize the role of bipedalism in hominid development. It stands as perhaps the salient point that differentiates the forebears of man from other primates. This unique ability freed the hands for myriad possibilities, carrying, tool-making, intricate manipulation. From this single development, in fact, stems all modern technology. Somewhat oversimplified, this new freedom of forelimbs posed a challenge. The brain expanded to meet it, and mankind was formed. Now, we're talking about walking. We all know people who have difficulty walking. My wife, Susan, did, and one of Nancy's early befriending actions was to take Susan walking. Along the way, Susan received physical therapy. One fun, creative therapist got 2 canes and had her hold one end of each while he, behind her, held the other ends. He would count out sharp marching steps, and they'd go around the therapy office. Susan had a big grin while this was happening. He was trying to get her to move her arms and stand up straight and not only look down. He explained that as you walk, you need both to scan the ground ahead of you and to be aware of the ground that is at your feet. You need simultaneously to know what you are coming to and what is under you. This movement from longer distance focusing to close-in awareness and back has to go on continually. Now, something like that happens to your thinking while you are walking. Your mind goes places while you walk, but at times your attention needs to come back to what's immediately at hand. This movement of thought is also a movement from longer distance focusing to close-in awareness and back. And many people, if you've ever, why does my mind clear up when I go for a walk? There's some, like this can be part of it. You're able to go out, your mind can go to this thing you want to think about, but also you have to come back and be aware of what's right under your feet. So a pilgrimage on foot is a chance to exercise both the physical and the mental aspects of walking. The bigger things you're thinking about, the things that may be ahead in your life, and the immediate things of the present right under your feet. That is to say, when we walk, our minds exercise along with our bodies. Mind, again, not brain. You could say your soul is exercising. If you allow it to happen, your mind will naturally turn to matters that you want or need to ponder. I say, if you allow. If you don't have those things stuck in your ears that you're listening to podcasts or music. Always having something to listen to is one way we foreclose being open and vulnerable. Now, it is hard to be present. And we all recognize the difficulty, so we cut slack for ourselves and others. But the gift of being present to the world, this morning, this creation, this space, this dew, this light, this temperature, this smell, these feelings on my feet and on the skin of my face, this God has made. This is his brand new gift. So I have a story. It was for me, about 4 weeks in. It was on the trail to Rabanal del Camino. It's on the final part of that trail, rather steep uphill. There's a man ahead of me. He was looking at the birds. I was getting used to stopping and looking, and this man, like me, also walking alone at his own pace, was stopping to look at the birds. I told him I used to have a friend in New York, a priest at St. Thomas, Michael Spurlock, who was a birder. But that word birder didn't seem to translate into Norwegian. His English was fine, but he didn't know what it meant. Anyway, he had a story to tell me of a very old man who was famous for walking long distances. And people were always asking him, how far do you walk in a day? And he would never answer. And finally, maybe out of frustration, he said this: never walk so fast that you leave your soul behind. So what do you think about when you're walking? Now, there's no one answer. I've given a kind of broad scope of the things you might think about or that might come upon our mind. Sometimes on the Camino, for me, things came up that I wanted to think about, or things that I needed to think through. Sometimes the liturgical calendar gave me thoughts. I happened to be walking on Easter Day, for instance. And if that doesn't give you thoughts, what's going to, right? I tried to bring to mind Easter hymns and see how many stanzas I could remember. It's usually something like 2.3, right? This one, okay, 80%, but each day, also, I tried to arrange to have some time of walking alone to be open and vulnerable for this process to work. So, a walker has feet and ears and eyes and nostrils open to creation. We walk on two legs and are thus different from other creatures, but we are still creatures. That is, we have sense organs. Reality is not virtual, and to walk is to grasp that corporeally, listening to the sounds or the quiet, looking at the landscape as you slowly pass it by, stopping to take in a vista, lots of nature. Sometimes you will be pierced by transcendence. Beauty itself can inflict a sort of wound on the soul. In the flash, there's a moment of self-awareness and sorrow for things undone or done. At the same time as there is a lifting over yourself and beyond yourself to a vastness that's awesome and attractive and compelling. Now, all that is possible. Some of all that I experienced, but to be honest, I found that a lot of what I think about is rather boring. There I am, I'm on the Camino, and up come old grudges, disagreements, conflicts in church, in politics, in family, with friends. Over and over again, the same old ground. What am I doing thinking about that while I'm here on the Camino? And then the instant corollary, why would I ever think about that anywhere, anytime? Two men were walking a pilgrimage to the temple, and one of them said, "I thank thee, Lord, that I am not like other men that have those things in their ears." There I was, so proud that I didn't have ear pods, that I was open to whatever was at hand for God to give me, and my mind was running over the details of a disagreement from years ago. This turned out to be a very important insight. It's in fact a gift that keeps on giving. It led, for instance, to many days of reflection on the question, why do I think I'm so important? I was reminded of something the scholar Robert Sachs wrote in his commentary on the book of Job. In cosmic terms, in the end, the problems of a single human being don't really amount to more than a hill of beans. Sachs says this is Job's realization at the end. I am infinitely valuable, and at the same time, so is every one of my fellow human beings. So this is a kind of decentering process. It's humility, and thus dredged up from my memory another bit of T.S. Eliot. Do not let me hear of the wisdom of old men, but rather of their folly, their fear of fear and frenzy, their fear of possession, of belonging to another or to others or to God. And right after that, the only wisdom we can hope to acquire is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. Now, why be a pilgrim walking to a grave? I said I walked this twice. This came to me towards the end of both these insights came to me in my first walk. And they're personal to me, but I share them because they probably will speak to most of you in your own way, in some translated way, in your own way of being open and vulnerable. And the first was that God wants me to focus on timeless things, on eternity. I thought a lot about that psalm, Psalm number 90, which at verse 12 in the prayer book says, "So teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom." The same psalm has the span of our life is 70 years, and in the traditional version, which I'm sure many of you know, it's 70, and perhaps in strength even 80, even 80 years. Whether I have just a few years ahead of me, I'm not that far shy of 70, or whether decades of strength remain, whether my remaining days be few or many, I should realize that the important things are timeless and eternal. Second, the Camino is full of crosses. They are on churches, they are on roadsides, and some of them are quite remarkable. One is that beautiful one Nancy showed us, or that iron one, beautiful by what's been done there, all of the rocks brought to it. So it's good to walk in our life as a path that goes from cross to cross. But what is that about? I found that on the Camino was the whole world. I think sort of expected the Camino to be a retreat. It's not a retreat. Everyone's there. They would find out, like you very quickly find out things about people, like why are you walking different? What do you do? I'm a priest. Oh. Well, I used to be a Catholic, but the church is just blah, blah. And I think, I'm on vacation. What's this going? So it's not a retreat. I had to get over that. But it's that getting quickly to the heart of things is really quite remarkable. People like virtual strangers will tell you about jobs they've lost, wounds they've received, deaths, abandonments, divorce. And amidst such things, pilgrims say that many say, they have no use for God, that they are walking the Camino for the physical challenge only. Many have rejected church, have no conscious relationship with God, some following other spiritual guides with perhaps questionable relationships to the truth. I saw that on the Camino one's still in the midst of raw and variegated humanity, and everyone's walking past, nonetheless, all those crosses. And I don't say this in any judgmental way. I mean, God is at work in a special way with every one of them. But that's where they are, or where they think they are. So when I got to Santiago and received my Compostela, I found myself unexpectedly overwhelmed with tears. There was a tiny chapel, empty of people. I went into it, and I wept uncontrollably. Bishop Michael Smith, who helps out in Dallas, suggested to me that this weeping is a gift, the meaning of which will gradually over time reveal itself. And I think what he said is true. What I've understood so far is that these tears were not about me, about personal sadness or loss, or not about a release at the completion of a task long anticipated. I think they were about me being allowed inside Jesus just a little bit, to share in his tears, and particularly his tears as he came to the end of his earthly life on a cross. Just a little picture into what humanity is about. But finally, and I won't say a lot about this, but what does it mean to be walking to a grave? Every one of our lives is a walk. Like it or not, we are on a way, on a Camino, and at the end of our walk is a grave. So we're all walking to a grave anyway. But to walk to the grave of a saint is an old thing to do. The grave of a saint is very old, and it has a certain oddness to it. Because, according to Christian faith, St. James is not there in Santiago. James is in the bosom of Abraham. His soul is in paradise. He awaits, as all the departed do, the resurrection of all human bodies at the last day. What is in Santiago is claimed to be his body. Whether it is his body or not, it is, however, not St. James. Aquinas somewhere says, "My soul is not me." It's also true, my body is not me. I am body and soul together. So let me tease out one implication. To walk to the grave where there may be the body of a saint is to come into close touch with the fundamental Christian claim of resurrection. We walk to the grave of St. James, sharing most deeply in the hope of St. James that the body will be raised and rejoined with the soul at the great getting up morning at the end of all time. So the grave of a saint is a place to focus the hope of resurrection. And in addition, so that's it. So you're walking to the grave. The grave is this place where the hope of the resurrection is focused, right? So it's like you're walking to Jesus. You're walking to God. But in addition, the Camino teaches that walking to a grave is not only walking into the hope of the resurrection or into God, it is also walking with God. It is intimacy with God along the way. That, I think, is part of the meaning of all those crosses. Leviticus chapter 26 at verse 12. God says, "And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and ye shall be my people. I will walk among you." And there is that great story, perhaps the best Camino story in the Bible. In Luke chapter 24, Jesus walks with 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. You know the story. He's with them. They don't recognize him. They recognize him at the end. He's suddenly gone. Jesus is at the end of the road, the Camino, but he's also there, here with us, in the middle of the way, as we continue our walk in this mortal life. Yeah, thank you.
Minutes of questions.
Father says there's 10 minutes of questions if you want. Sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your wife, but I suspect you might have an answer here. I'm not walking for a loss. I'm walking with my wife in a Camino of love and a sense of gratitude.
Yes.
Would you have any suggestions for good reads?
Good reads.
Yeah,
Oh.
things to read in advance to kind of prepare, that's why I'm here, to kind of prepare my mind for that component of my Camino.
I don't have anything that quickly comes to mind. Someone else might. I found it interesting in advance to read novels that the Camino was in, one way or the other. There's one by David Lodge that someone had recommended. What's the name of it?
I think it's therapy.
Therapy. But it's not actually, it's kind of the opposite of your situation, but you could apply it. Yeah.
As Jesus was out walking in the wilderness for 40 days, he was open to spiritual attack.
Yes. Well, that's part of the vulnerability, isn't it? So the question is, Jesus in the wilderness walking open to spiritual attack. Thoughts on that? I think that is, of course, part of the vulnerability. Just stick close to God. It's great to, I tried to memorize, because I didn't want to carry any books, and I don't like turning on my phone for this sort of thing, but I tried to memorize the fixed parts of morning prayer so that I could, as I was walking, say them. And you end up taking 30 minutes with a Benedictus or something, because you'll just think about something else and then you'll come back to it. So, but anyway, for spiritual attack in general, like just walking around the city of Boston or whatever, it's good to keep God on the mind and to have some things, Lord's Prayer and other sorts of things that we might just say slowly whenever we're walking. Yeah.
There are two poets. I think poetry will give you a good idea about walking.
Yes.
So, Christ. One is by Thomas Gray in the Eulogy in the Country Churchyard, where it says, "The paths of glory with bond lead but to the grave." And then Growling in he has some doubts about the resurrection, but he says, "A goal to see it, hoping it would be so." I think reading poetry and walking are two things that go together.
Could you repeat, and I'll put into the mic so everyone can hear, the two poems you mentioned?
Oh, one by Gray, the Elegy in the Country Churchyard,
Let me say it. The Elegy in the Country Churchyard,
Thomas Gray.
Thomas Gray.
The lowing to the church bells sound the bow and parting day, the blowing pine ones, flutter the bee.
Yes.
The farmer walks his weary way, leaves the world, and then, but in later on it says, "The public circumstance, etc., etc., but the paths of glory be but to the grave."
The paths of glory lead but to the grave.
And the other one, Browning,
Browning.
saying he's somewhat doubtful about resurrection. He
Mm-hmm.
said he would go to see, hoping it would be so. He mentioned something.
Yes, he's doubtful. Yes, but he'll go hoping it's so. That's wonderful. I'll say another word for poems like one I think is great to memorize is "The Morning Has Broken," which we know is a hymn. I learned after my last Camino. I was inspired to try to sing it, and I was alone, so the birds were scared, but no one else. It was Percy Dearmer, dear old Percy Dearmer, got Eleanor Farjeon to write that poem because there was no hymn written to the meter of that tune. 3-2-3, yeah. Morning is broken, and so it's wonderful to memorize and to have things like that to go on. Recently, I noticed a hymn. I'll praise my Maker while I've breath, and when my body lies in death, I will praise him with my nobler powers. I'm messing it up. Anyway, Bam. Yes.
So I'm curious if your walking with God is the same as Nancy's God showing help.
Yes. I mean, God did show up. Yes. That's very nice. Yeah. Yeah. Walking with God and God showing up. Yeah. 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 Sometimes you don't see him. He's, of course, always there. But then sometimes he needs to do. I would sometimes enter a town and say, where should I spend the night? God. Right. Yeah.
In response to the channel that wanted suggestions on reading, but we would like her wanted to write. Well, it's okay. He's been watching you do his book drive all the seconds, cost you the first of the book. It's very philosophical and a monthful. Three friends agrees to describe both Benedict as a theologian and Pope John Paul II as a philosopher, and it's difficult, but it's probably not some real news.
It's a very fat book, yes. But if you like electronic books, so you can. I took the Brothers Karamazov on my phone. But so Crossing the Threshold of Hope, John Paul II. Thank you.
Is there a characteristic of God that you came to understand for the first time, or if not for the first time, in a new, different way in your walking faith?
A characteristic of God that I came to understand maybe in a new way. I mean, it helped me be a bit more aware, this isn't like the re-entry afterwards, of the everyday importance of God being with me. It's important for me to remember, Saturday, March 1st, Boston, Church of the Advent. This is for each of us, this is a day in our Camino, and God is with us, and God is showing up.